Okay, guys, one more talk, and then we'll have a break. We're going to take a left turn here, right? If you take a look at your program, and the next discussion is a panel session about employers in direct primary care. And we have a panel that's kind of an interesting mix of both direct primary care operators that are either exclusively or disproportionately employer-focused in providing DPC to employers. John Collier, the CEO of Proactive MD. John Hernandez, the CEO of PeakMed. And then in combination, we have a couple of broker consultants that, if they're not certified already by the Rosetta, by Dave's Institute, I think that they will be soon. They represent kind of that rare subsegment that get it. And are trying to transform how employers think about employer benefits and how to incorporate and effectively leverage this new care delivery model called direct primary care that be quite effective. Andy Neary and Drew Kalstead are representative of that. So panel discussion, Andy is moderating. He will certainly open it up to questions in the audience as well. Andy, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Working? Guys hear me? There.
Well, it's funny, Drew and I, right after lunch, were talking about what we've learned so far today. And I had to tell him it was interesting. The best thing I've learned to date is that Zach has inspired me to grow a man bun. Because my girlfriend's been asking me to do it, and when I saw him do this move on stage, I'm like, it is done. All he needs is a New Zealand accent, and I am set. No, thanks for having us here. We're going to ask some questions. We've got some various different perspectives on DPC sitting in the panel here. So I thought a good first question, and before I ask the question, anybody who's on live stream, all you've got to do is click on the link in the chat box if you have any questions. But the first question I thought would be great to throw out there is, there are different various aspects of direct primary care. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'd let the three gentlemen down at the end kind of explain what their models are quickly and how they're going about providing that to the employer space.
Sounds good. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Collier. I'm with Proactive MD. Proactive MD is an employer-based direct primary care. So we primarily focus on employee relationships. And these employee relationships are self-insured employers, typically 500 plus employees, and we worked with them to help control their healthcare costs. We build an on-site or near-site healthcare clinic. And I look forward to telling you a little bit more as we go on.
Good afternoon. My name is John Hernandez with PeakMed. I am the CEO of PeakMed. We are a DPC organization based out of Denver, Colorado. We touch all facets. We actually do work directly with consumers, as well as we do small, middle, and large employer groups. So we look to kind of cover the bases across all of those different types of organizations. Our primary customer base right now would probably be, we have a fair amount of government contractors, school districts, all the way down to the less than 50, and somebody that's maybe a broker, as we have some clients that are brokers, as well as we do have some small groups and dealerships and other forms like that.
And I think I might. What I would just add to what I mentioned, so just give you a flavor of some of the employers that we have. So we have companies like the Boulder Ballet, ballet dancers, and then the admin that supports them. Craft beer companies, like I mentioned. We take care of municipalities, and that's a fun one to take care of. Oftentimes, the municipalities are pretty rich in health benefit, and so can create some unique models with municipalities. We take care of plumbers, take care of electricians. We take care of Digital Globe. They're rocket scientists that have force satellites up in space, and so there's details involved with those employers. And kind of the bigger they get, what we found is there's more details involved. The beauty is the plumber that had no health benefit for his employees can afford, let's say, $50 of the average $70 per member per month, and now you're giving that owner a feel-good because he can provide health care for his employees, and employees are getting $10 out of every paycheck per month that go to direct primary care, so they're actually getting care. now. So we take care of whether it's a company of 2,000 or a company of 5. We're happy to have a discussion on what we can do to help benefit those employers.
I thought I'd throw this next question at Drew. Drew and I, happen to sit on the proverbial other side of the table, right? We work directly with employers. We help employers. In fact, I'll tell everybody here, about 2 years ago, I changed my job title to healthcare strategist, because when I said brokers, the look I got on faces, you get lumped into this category, right? So this question is more for Drew here on the broker side is, what do you think is the biggest problem with employer-sponsored benefits today, and why do you think DPC holds so much potential for improvement?
Sure. So it's probably no secret. Everyone has been talking about it today, the dysfunctional, broken system that we all are experiencing, not in DPC, but in the fee-for-service world. So that's translating in the employer world into ever-increasing claim dollars and ever-increasing costs. Then they have to split that with their employees, cost shifting. So in a word, cost is the problem. Really, number two is most health plans, group health plans, are actually sick plans. People wait to get sick. There's not a really good engagement, so the employees are waiting, and they're financing sickness in a broken system after the fact without proactive care. So those two things really combine. I would also add a lack of engagement. So the members, the people, there's an equation I reference, unit cost times number of units equals total cost. And number of units is how sick or well are the people that are needing care. And that's what the employer's plan is financing. And so as those people are not well, they're not making good decisions, they have high blood pressure, they know it, they're not treating it, all the things that you folks know very well. The lack of engagement, I think all of those things come together to, we're just really financing sickness in a broken system after the fact. And it is absolutely unsustainable. Things that used to cost $100,000 are now 150. I mean, like 2 years.
These cost $50,000 are now 100. Specialty pharmacy, we have huge things coming.
Howitzers aimed at these employer plans, and it's difficult to manage. So that's the problem. Direct primary care, in a nutshell, what's the solution?
The primary care physician, which most of you are before you became direct primary care focused, you indeed were the gateway to the healthcare system.
Now, most of the cost happens in the system. The sequoias grow here, right? We've got knees and hearts and cancers and all those things, lab, x-ray.
But most people don't have a primary care physician relationship. And when they do, they see them 1.2 times a year.
So replacing that system, if we replace the gateway, the goal is then all the things that people have been talking about today, I don't have to reference them, how to get people engaged and healthier so we grow fewer sequoias. The sequoias are the problem, which are the healthcare costs that explode inside of a plan. So those are the problems, and I see that as where DPC
is a significant component for the solution.
Any questions in the audience before I go on to the next one?
Yeah, I bristle when I hear the word gatekeeper, and I don't think that was your intention. But for decades, family physicians and primary care providers were called gatekeepers. And I think more than anything else, we are advocates for the patients, and that's why this care model works. The second thing I'd like to point out is the huge element of the business that is directed at producing data to manage people's health. When Dave's slides showed that 20% of people's health is dependent on clinical services, and where we know from the analytics packages that are out there that they can only control 30% of an employed population's variability in their healthcare costs. So that leaves 6% addressable by employee-based programs. It is probably a better idea to sit there and say, hey, we'll take care of your people, we'll do the best we can, and we will cut the cost, because that's one of the really important bottom lines. We want people happy, and we want people taken care of at a low cost. And that is the healthiest outcome possible. The rest is frou-frou, and I don't think it really applies well to the DPC market, the kind of doctors we're trying to be.
And you bring up a very good point talking about analytics. Let's go into that a little bit. So for John and John down at the end there, we talk about analytics. How are you two using analytics at the employer space to validate the return on investment that the employers that you, and Clint, you can chime in here, that the three of you are working with to show that there are better outcomes for employers and the employees in the employer model?
Well, I mean, what you have to understand is we actually do believe wholeheartedly in DPC. We care all about patient navigation. We understand the relationship between the physician and the patient is exactly what we're all wired to be, right? So we're heavy on cultural connectivity with our groups. And so there's a lot of education and things that go into that process. There's hand-holding and there's a really touch and a big feel component of what we have to deliver, and education and making sure those engagements are happening on a recurring basis is all part of how we have to deliver this service. Technology, to some degree, is the only thing we have now that can help validate and provide the evidence that what we're doing is uniquely special and different in driving the outcomes that we're all after, right? And so we go back and understand that, we have clients today that if they don't get some level of input and reporting that's coming back to them through the form of a feedback loop, they're going to disconnect to some degree without that validation. And so a key element that we try to focus and we're really trying to do is make sure that on a monthly basis and create like a pattern, an operating protocol, if you will, that the clients then connect onto and they're gravitating towards, and validating the model. Also, it's all about health improvement, the outcomes, but also ROI. I hate to say it, a lot of, especially larger employers, ROI is a calculation that we have to bring back to them. Smaller groups, the less than 50s, they actually do see this as a benefit, and they're maybe okay not getting all that recurring information flow coming back their way. And they're probably really easy for most of us to navigate and manage those relationships. But those larger employers, there's some amount of overhead associated with that. So technology is needed, partnerships with a lot of the tech firms that are here with us today, and making sure that we have a collaboration and pulling data and understanding how that data impacts our care delivery process. Total cost of care analysis, I have to say, is extremely important. Because you cannot take a fee-for-service primary care physician that charges, that's some subcomponent of their total cost of care and compare that against us. You can't really do that because there's not a direct correlation as to how a fee-for-service and what their costs and reimbursements are. It's completely night and day different as to how we deliver our services and how much more. So you mentioned 1.2 visits, I believe. We're exceeding 5 per year on an annualized basis. Our goal is to get to 8 per year on an annualized basis as far as utilization. Data is helping us figure out what it takes to improve these measures, and employers need that communication and feedback to validate it.
Which measures are you giving employers? Clinical measures?
Clinical measures, not quite as, so the clinical measures, right? So we have, things around physician, navigation of care is a big part of it. Gaps in care analysis is a big part of it. Understanding your high claimant analysis is a big part of it. Plan design, optimization of plan designs. They need to get a better understanding of what the optimization of those plans are. Should we go from a fully insured to a self-insured, or maybe that middle ground of a level plan option? Can you help us on a pathway as a care provider to start helping us make those decisions along that path? And can we maybe come in on the front end of some of this stuff to help prepare them for some of these evolutionary changes? We really don't like fully insured products, so we want, most of our employer groups greasing the skids, if you will, to help them move from a fully insured product to other, more products that we could then drive better savings around and produce better results.
So, from the large employer side, this is a huge investment, huge upfront investment for them. So, proof's in the pudding, and data is the tool that we use to prove it, just like John was saying. But on the flip side of that, data is a weapon, and it's a weapon that physicians can use. Specifically on the self-funded side, self-insured side of things, that's their data. The employer owns that data. And so we have software and analytics that allows us to look at those claims, allows us to do, 36 months, before we ever come in, we know that population really well because we've looked at the last 3 years of those claims, and we aggregate it to biometrics. And then going forward, on a real-time basis, monthly, we're getting feeds of these claims. And so our physicians are able to look at that, and when Mr. Smith walks in, we can see how much Mr. Smith, the plan is paying for them. We can see how he's using this network as a consumer. And we can really help educate that Mr. Smith to be a better consumer of healthcare. Say, Mr. Smith, you went to the ER. Call me. I'm available to you after hours. I want to help you. As far as clinical measures that employers ask for, so large employers, and their benefits consultants, they still think in terms of things like HEDIS measures and things like that. And I know that's probably a bad word to even say here, but I'm with you guys. But they think in that. And so it's important, if you're going to compete in this employer space, to come up with some type of solution that still can show national benchmarks, that can show as close as we can, just like John was saying. There's not going to be an apples to apples comparison of this DPC model versus any other model that's out there. But we want to get as close as we can and give, this movement's about transparency. And so if we want to truly be transparent, we got to show that data. And if we want the employer to be transparent with us, we got to take their data as well.
I would just add to that, the way that you best improve your data is access. So you can have all kinds of fancy tech tools, et cetera, to try to manipulate and change your data and this and that and the other, and you can have biases, but the best way to improve your data as an employer group is access. Commonwealth Foundation, I believe, had a study in 2013 that says that if you have a primary care provider, you're going to decrease your spend for that patient and or employer group by 33%. And the interesting thing there, that was a study of mainly fee-for-service docs. So if you have a primary care provider, I prefer the term physician, if you have that DPC physician fronting your plan, and you're going to have crazy access, you're going to have all kinds of awesome data. And so that's where we want to rely upon tech to help us prove that, right? Because what do we want to get away from? We're running away from pecking for payment. It was Garrison that mentioned that to me a long time ago, and it sticks in my brain because I still peck for payment on a daily basis. So how can we get as few keystrokes as possible to show our value? And we know we provide a ton of value, but we just don't want to spend half of our day, which is a recent study, I think it was published in Forbes, pecking for payment. So we rely upon tech, and that's part of what I think Hint's building here is few keystrokes as possible, and or having your MA keystroke for you, and then showing decreased urgent care visits, decreased ER visits, decreased elective imaging, decreased elective surgeries. But to John's point here, some of these larger employer groups, when they're writing you a large check every month, they can say things like, I want to know how many times our employees are texting you. How many times are employees calling you? What have you done to engage them? And then you have to show that, right? So that's where you have some tools, Spruce, Hail, et cetera, to help along that pathway. So if you are targeting the larger employer groups, the demand will be greater. Smaller guys, like John's plumbing company, they could care less about all that stuff. That's the beauty. I love those guys. But their checks are different that they write to.
Yeah, for some of when you guys approach potential employers, what have been some of the things that maybe those data points? What are some of those data points or analyses when somebody does care about those numbers? What are some things that you share with them in order to kind of appease their ROI that they're looking for?
You want me to cover that?
You can all go.
So we do something similar. So 2-3 years worth of historical data is usually where we start as well. One of the key elements is to understand their enrollment information, so their cycles associated with new enrollees, their add new delete information. High claimant analysis is a big part of that, at getting in front of it. Chronic diseases, we get a decent understanding of where those disease states are. Their pharmaceutical information and pharmaceutical claims data is a key element to that as well. And there's a fair amount of patterns, referral patterns and some other things that we look at that help us evaluate whether or not solutions like maybe a narrow network, not for all, but every once in a while, maybe some narrow network options are a way to go to drive some discounting because of the type of population that you actually have and that you're serving. So once you get that front end information, you really could start refining the types of things that you're doing and how you're managing that population. And you're going to want to hold yourself accountable for that. It's not just the other way where the employers are, now it's almost like this self-accountability thing. We want to measure how well we're doing for our population. That's a part of why data is important to us. And it's a very cool thing to feel when we actually bring that information flow and we're educating a client about that, and then we're in a meeting because we hold regular meetings with our customers, and when it's not just the data element, but when you're telling the stories about what's happening on our mobile unit, a 40-foot RV that we're putting into the community to help our special needs patients, there's an incredible amount of data off of that. But more importantly, the tears that come in those sessions when we're meeting with employers and a board member or a director on the board is sitting there saying, I cannot believe this is what we're doing to impact our community specifically for special needs. The data is the data. It's great. It's fine. Validation, great. It makes us feel good about what we're doing. But in the meantime, it's those tears when we're sitting in meetings that I believe are the most special part of it.
And what I would add to that is part of this too, guys, is the physicians is we're keystroking it, right? We don't have to produce the fancy report. We need to have the tech tools that as we keystroke, send to someone else that has the bandwidth and the expertise to produce the fancy report. And that's part of where the broker comes in. So we work with brokers, Hub International is an example. So we keystroke, put the data in, sends to them, and they analyze. So there's a variety of ways to do that, I think, but in these self-funded groups, you'll find that you can rely upon your brokers, which have years of expertise in this arena, to help produce those reports. And plus, the beauty with that is you now have kind of it's not biased, right? Because if you're trying to make all that fancy data yourself, and you're getting a check every month, there could potentially be some internal bias. So you put data in, send to others, they analyze and produce reports. And by the way, that's what, to a certain extent, brokers for these large employer groups are kind of paid for.
No, I'm trying to understand the chronic disease management. I mean, an ROI is an investment and a return on investment. So that's dollars and cents, right? You took care of somebody and it cost less. To me, that's the ROI. And then the other elements of validation are that your patients are happy. So again, it's like one of these things. I have these conversations with benefits folks where I am, and it just blows my mind because it's not value added, it's cost added, and all the other stuff is stuff that we can do. So where's the ROI in telling them that they've got diabetics? I mean, yeah, you just give me the 3 years worth of data and I'll target them. I mean, as physicians, we can just do that. We don't need another layer. Okay? And it should be. The data's in our charts.
But it's a little more complicated than that. And I mean, in the employer, there are the people who run the big checks, they expect more than that. And what we have to realize is this is a very saturated market as well. So we're out there, we're competing against a very established market of the on-site health industry. And they're doing these very, very robust reports, these ROIs, and you have to be able to compete with that. You have to be able to really prove your value. And again, you're right, though. It is dollars and cents. It will be directly reflected in the claims. But so what exactly is your question, Dino?
Well, my question is, if you can show people their claims from last year, no DPC, and your claims from this year, and the cost went down 20%, can we please try to understand why we need the rest?
No, that's actually a really good point.
Clint, if I could just make a point. I got to rephrase the question here. So you're saying, so the audience can hear this, you're saying if we're showing 20% claim savings from year 2 versus year 1, why do we need everything else?
It's actually a really good point, though, and we've had this struggle internally that if we save you money, who cares whether it was less ER visits or urgent care visits, or you found a diabetic sooner, or you moved a BMI from 32 to 27. So there is that piece, because to get to that piece requires time, energy, effort, and money. But that's also kind of cool too if you think about it. If you've got some tech solutions that allow you to do that, or the broker has those tech solutions. So what we found down this pathway, if we find some things, or let's say we take a smoker from being a smoker to a non-smoker, or we improve a person's hemoglobin A1C, et cetera, we give that raw data to the broker, and they associate money with that. So now, and I don't know the algorithms, but what I do know is that when you tell them that, they're like, you just saved this company $52,000 on this patient over 10 years.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm proud of our data, and I want to spotlight it, and I want to show the power of direct primary care. So if you don't show it, there's a lot of other variables here. There's brokers who could say, we did some cost shifting, we did plan design, and that's why you lowered 20%. No, I want to prove the power of direct primary care. And if we want to do it, embrace data, believe in it and be proud to show it.
Zach?
Yeah, so I've got a question. Can we just talk, be interested to hear your thoughts on strategies for brokers and direct care or direct primary care organizations working effectively?
Yeah, and I want to make a point right here, if I could. And I'm going to steal a phrase from Daryl Moon sitting over there. When you look at the employer level guys, when they look at their benefits, you ask employers what the biggest problems in healthcare are, and they'll say it's the providers, it's the insurance companies. But I'll tell you what, the biggest problem in healthcare right now is employers who give the benefits to their HR team and give them zero incentive to save costs. That's the biggest problem in healthcare right now. And I tell employers all the time, I ask them, how many organizations give their employees access to an unlimited company credit card with no controls on how, when, and where they can use it? And not a single hand goes up, and I say, false. Every time you give your employees one of these, it's an insurance card, you're giving them access to an unlimited company credit card. So if you aren't putting effective controls in place of how, when, and where they can use this, you're done. And DPC is one of those effective controls of how they use this card. So with that being said, Zach, now you got me excited. You've been raising your hand for a while.
I'm curious, when you're talking to employers beyond the 5 to 10 employee mark people, you have to offer some kind of wraparound insurance that they can go, so when they're not going to the primary care, they're going to the specialist, when you have to get hospitalized, and certain things require that other insurance part. How do you get a wraparound plan? Where do you find one? Can you talk about that whole thing? Who's designing them?
And this is a great segue, because I want to ask Drew this question. It's to your point too, Zach. When you talk about bringing DPC into the employer model, what are some benefit strategies that brokers, consultants should be using to make sure that DPC is having the biggest impact on the program?
So, great question, and that's I have some background for the last several years of plugging in telemedicine, $7 a month, all right? They're spending $500,000 or $1 million a year, and that's increasing, compound by 10% a year, or 12 or 8, but the number is compounding. Sliding that $7 into a $600 single rate and a $2,000 family rate's pretty easy. Now we get to direct primary care, we have to justify a much bigger dollar, $75 per adult, give or take. So how do you do that? How do you get the shoehorn out to put that $800,000 in that 600-person company? So understanding what the cost drivers are and working through the justifications that were just referenced, how do we justify this is going to work? Big picture, employers that are self-funded, level funded, that they actually, if they spend less, if the people need less, the employer spends less. It's a cost plus equation. So getting them in, making sure they're in a funding arrangement where they win if their employees are healthier. So that's number one. Health plans generally that are engaging of the employee. The plans that have lower deductibles, and frankly they're all high these days, but relatively speaking, with PPO copays and things like this, a lot of people will pay $50 to $150 more per tier as an employee for the privilege of spending only $50 when I see a doctor. Okay, that's a comfort zone. Now, high deductible health plans couldn't have had a worse name than a high deductible health plan. But now you've got a $3,000 or $4,000 exposure, and I owe $2,000 or $3,000 down here. We put that in place so that the employee is engaged financially, and you put direct primary care next to it, where it's a zero-cost environment to go to this provider, but I'm with Cigna, I can go to these doctors if I want to, but this will be $100, $200, $300. So there is an optimized cocktail, if you will, which is an employer that has the opportunity to win when his people are healthier and when they need less. And number two, they have a planned strategy. We call it high-performance strategy, where we have an engaging health plan that, if it's, I like to limit out of pocket to $4,000, maybe $4,500, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. People can't afford $1,000. What's that marginal thing going to do up there? That's not going to help anything. So we need to have a rational plan design. And so engaging employers in the discussion, instead of buying a PPO and a high deductible plan where your people are buying up, maybe we lose the PPO. Maybe we put in 2 different high deductible plans. Maybe these even have that small network from BUCA, A, B, or C. and then we put direct primary care and we bolted on to the outside. Today there have been a lot of discussions, I'll wrap with this, of I like it being outside because once they get their fingers on it, it's kind of dirty. They got a little grease on their fingers, right? So you keep it outside, engage the employee to engage with you, and do all the special things you guys know how to do, the very reason we're in this room. So then the final piece of that is taking your contributions, which my company, CoBiz Financial, we spend about $5 million a year. By the way, our high performance strategy has been flat for 9 years. Okay, that's not a bad place using the broken system. But if we can take that, and once we decide how much the $5 million is going to be, then we slice the pizza back here. Okay, it's $50 a month to you and so on. We create strategies with the contributions to get the people to do the activities that we want them to do. Get to your primary care doctor. Do your health risk assessment. Be health aware. And weave that in. If I only needed 50 to get you on my health plan, I'm going to charge you 100, and if you do these things, you only pay 50. So I'm using the employee's money as the carrot. It's kind of a stick painted orange, if you will. So that cocktail of, it's about engaging the people. It's population health. CFOs need reports.
HR managers need something that's not gonna,
that people aren't going to hate. The CEOs need to know, is the arrow going in the right direction? Is it flat or down? And those are that's a quick, I could go on and on, but those are quick ideas.
And I think a key element on that is we're actually start showing distinct areas where we're bending the curves. And when we start bending the curves, it helps somebody like Drew go in and do the work he has to do to get these plan structures in place. He needs that evidence from us as to where we're doing that distinct area so he could go do his job, right? And now we're empowering the brokers to act, the smart ones, to be able to go in and do that work. And I've met with 100 brokers. I think I mentioned this earlier. There's only, out of 100, 5% that really start to get and understand how we need to do this and what the right structures are to do what it is he does. Another key element is employers like to invest back into their population. We found that, especially for larger groups. They actually like to take that cost savings after we bent these curves, and they like to put it back to work to get to the next cycle. It's basically taking reallocation of funds that are now available and put it back to work and improve the service lines that then we provide as a DPC community and start layering it like an onion over time, extracting away from fee-for-service what we could do within our own practices. That's why ROI becomes so important.
I would just add to that, the best dollar that a company could spend in the healthcare quagmire is with a direct primary care provider. You're going to get your best ROI on that. And if you want to gauge that, just talk to HR director. Say, are you getting many complaints this year? And so they, if the plans aren't working for the company, HR is going to hear it. And that's part of the beauty in our market where we have some really big players, is that they're sometimes our best marketing tool. These players that are working with companies, and these companies aren't happy. So then they come to us, and the bar was set so low that it's pretty easy to step over that.
There was a mention made of, in this arena, we're competing with kind of the on-site employer clinic guys that are doing analytics. Just to kind of, answer to that, we're actually seeing those people enter the market with direct primary care attached to their name, and there's not a doctor in the room. And they're basically capturing momentum that's building at a national level in an attempt to grab, take a hold of a higher concept of this really market and use it to do things with telehealth and in a way that they've been doing, like with casinos and things like that. And it's kind of, have you guys seen that in different areas, and just any suggestions on getting organized to kind of head that off and keep it in the direct primary care in our control, with physician-led solutions? Is that wrong?
So the question that came up was competing with on-site clinics where there's really not a physician presence, and how can we compete with that? Drew, you got points on that?
Yeah, so the the big picture on this is so much of this is new to employers, and they don't really understand all the moving parts. All of you, we've just been listening how hard it is to jump into primary care, direct primary care, change your practice, buy the software, change your life, right? So look back to where did it come from. And some it's direct, or rather on-site clinics, near-site clinics. There are what we call enterprise, where there's bricks and mortar that's owned several locations. There's hybrid models and fee-for-service. There's direct primary care that are one or two practices. So ideally, today, like it or not, the advisor does influence a ton in the employer market. Okay, the goal is you find the advisor who is objective, who's taking the time to learn the differences and to find the right fit for the right situation. 95, not all brokers are created equally. I use the phrase frequently, Larry, Curly, and Moe. I happen to, I learned about all this literally this past summer. And I just jumped in with John. I'm in hook, line, and sinker. I've stopped everything else I'm doing to make sure I can embrace this. In 30 years of doing what I do, which is helping employers finance health and sickness, this is the single biggest thing I've ever witnessed to change everything. And so I'm all in. Now, what your goal is, you got to find who are the guys that are transactional, that golf a lot and don't add value. Run from those guys and find the people that you can work with and partner with that will help you promote what you're doing in your community, either to the smaller or larger employers. But there is differentiation that needs to take place. And if you harness that, each model has a different application.
I'm going to actually...
I was just going to say, so should we cancel our golf time later, Drew?
Well,
our tea time, we're canceling it?
I said that earlier, it's a joke, but then in the green room over here, I'm like, I got to go, I got to golf. And he looked at me, where are you playing? And I'm like, no, I'm not playing golf. I'm acting like a broker.
The one little piece I would just add to the employer side, if you're a direct primary care practice, regardless of your size, just deploy to the employer. If you have the bandwidth to put an on-site on once a month, put it on. Show up there a half day a week in a conference room and take care of those employees. On site, you learn so much from going on site. If you can't necessarily do the on site, at least go once. We started something called Ask the Doctor, like I mentioned, where we go, we try to hit our employers at least once a quarter. We'll bring in lunch and we'll just talk about everything from, should I drink coconut water to which, what do I think? What do you think about colonics? So go to the employer, be on site, okay? Don't sit in your box and wait for them to come to you. Go to them, and sometimes you can use tech tools to go to them.
All right, this question comes from the live feed, Matthew Hayden. He said, 5 years ago, I was getting cold calls from insurance companies interested in partnering with my DPC before I had even launched the service. And then they attended the FMEC DPC conference alongside physicians. Now they are our main opposition lobby to passing DPC laws in various states. Any insights into what is going on with insurance companies, since their biggest purchasers, the employers, are increasingly interested in DPC? Since we can save them money too, why aren't they offering policies that pair with DPC across the country? Who wants to? That's a volleyball. Who wants to take that?
I'll take a little nugget. I'll take a nugget shot at that quick.
Sorry, the advisor.
The advisor. I'm not a broker.
The
I'm
strategist.
I'm a healthcare strategist. So the health plans, what they're doing, and you've been witnessing it, is taking the bell curve, if you were upstairs in a lunch or earlier breakout session, within their networks, which they have two major constituencies. They have their provider or doctor network, and they have their clients, their group clients, all right? Frankly, I think the provider network is their more valued partner, okay? And if we go get into all of this, we're disrupting this, okay? So they've been slow to adopt the cottage industry and this revolt that's coming, all right? So instead what they're doing is they're building their ACO networks. They go into their own network, which is 5,000 strong, perhaps in Denver, and they identify the 2,000 or 3,000 that are getting better results, data-driven, sharing data with those, calling it their ACO, Accountable Care Organization, High Performance Network, Patient-Centered Medical Home Network. So they're building something to compete with this, okay? So they're not reacting. I think you're all evolving at the same pace, but and while you may be them, forgive me how I say this, it's been hard to teach an old dog new tricks. If the incentives don't change, what they're saying is if we give them data and we help you understand where you're falling down, they embrace it. Of course, you're good people. Every doctor would.
We're going to change how we pay. We put incentives in different places.
Okay, and if we're going to do those things, we believe we can change what's happening.
I believe there's incremental change there, but it is not huge. But that's what the carriers are doing, and they're not quite sure what to do with the evolving DPC world. It's not scalable where Cigna can put it in tomorrow for their clients nationwide. How do they integrate it, et cetera? So I think
Yeah, I mean, we've had probably about a half a dozen or so meetings with large corporate health plans from across the country, and don't be it. We're not jumping the fence, believe us, right? But one of the things that we're learning a lot about is how they're looking at us as a space, as a part of this industry now, right? Because we're now relevant, we're now meaningful, we're now actually, creating a following and a critical mass, and there's like a culture now behind what it is we're doing. And insurance companies, honestly, everyone that I've talked to is freaked out about it because they're saying you're not in network. So how do we work with you? How do we navigate, steer, do all the things that they're trying to figure out how to do? I'm going to try to be brief. I could talk about this for a long time.
We got 2 more questions here.
But long story short, they are trying to figure us out, and there are some strategies that are coming about going into 2018 that you're going to start to see happen, where the insurance carriers are going to be more involved in this DPC space. It will start to happen here shortly.
All right, so I'm going to go here, and then you. I forgot he had his hand up too. Joel?
So as a doc who's been very involved in academic medicine and medical student and residency education, I am very concerned that if in the next 5 years we aren't doing this with all businesses, that healthcare will be delivered by Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and it won't be doctors delivering that care. What are we doing, or what have you guys done to get in front of medical students? Have you had any luck getting inside the academic medical center?
Question is, what are we doing to get in front of the medical students and medical academic?
Yeah, actually, one of our employers that we work with is a medical school, and so we take care of the students. But I think you're exactly right. This has to. We want this to be kind of take off like wildfire within starting at the medical school and then on into residency. We want to make primary care relevant again, and we want to make it, something to be proud of. And I agree that we need to kind of push this focus more and more. So, we speak at the medical schools all the time. We partner up with the local residency programs in the areas that we service, and we try to keep getting this education out more and more and more.
Yeah, I would just add to that, echoing his statements a bit. So, number one, we have residents rotate through, so they can rotate through on their medical side from the university, and they can also rotate and do their month of business with us, which is 3 more weeks of business that I had in residency. The third thing we do is we have nurse practitioners and PAs rotate through our clinics as well. And then the other piece there is we go and deploy, and we do round sessions at the universities. A while back, we asked the family medicine residents how many have heard of direct primary care, and this is maybe a few years or so ago. And most if not all raised their hands, which was awesome, and I think you're just seeing that momentum, and you got to get to the students. I totally agree. And then you have guys like Dr. Paul Thomas with Plum Health, sees you speak at Michigan Academy of Family Physicians annual meeting, and he comes up to you and says, hey, listen, I really like this, I'm going to do it when I come out. And Paul now with Plum Health came out of residency in first DPC doc in Detroit. So it's great to see those kind of things happening.
So, I'm trying to figure out why we can't still just use the data from the tech that we have here, because we can do it way cheaper. The solutions that I've seen with Hint, I kind of bought for a while and I kind of turned around. It took a long time for me to turn around and look at these things. Elation, Hint, and Spruce in combination has all the data that all the employers need and want. And since it's already there, it is doable for $1 or $2 per member per month. And it's in the doctor's hands, who has the majority of the levers anyway. So why in the world would we go off and spend $7 on telemedicine, $5 on a smart? Hey, listen, if the employer wants to do an on-site clinic, that's cool. That's fine. I got nothing to say. But if you're going to come to me as a community provider and say, I need to be a partner with you, then I think the benefits folks need to start kind of thinking about the fact we can do it better and cheaper. That's your fiduciary. And we can do it with the tech in this room. That's what Hint's about. That's what Elation's about. We have it. We don't need extra crap.
So, we got to get the benefits folks not coming to tell us what to do, but to work with what we got. I've asked the employers, I have asked them, what do you want from the doctors? They said, I want an engaged provider. We have never done that as an industry. Healthcare has never done that. We're doing it as direct primary care. We're engaged. That's more important. So let's collect the data from the tech that we have developed. It's brilliant. And just blow the other stuff out of the water. I don't like this old benefits model, and that's what Dave was talking about. Fiduciary, you have a responsibility to make the employer spend less. So why not? That's my question. Why don't we just let the doctors?
I'll explain something quick. The biggest problem everybody in this room faces at the employer model, to John's point, is for every 100 brokers you'll talk to, 5 get it. I'm talking just get it. Now you're going to get 2 that maybe actually implement it. And the problem is they've been teaching their clients how to build a health plan backwards for years. They start by picking a carrier, a large national carrier. Let's make sure their network is big enough so it covers everybody, and then let's pick the plan design. They completely ignore the member experience. So we have to flip the script and start with that member experience and then build the plan around that. And that's the 2 out of the 100 that are doing it, that's what they're doing. So I know you've been handing your hand up for quite a while.
Actually, I want to talk about price transparency. You brought it up. I think one of the most significant pieces of integrity for direct primary care is price transparency. And the reason we're leaving the system that we were in that was broken is now we're going into more of a free market understanding, and we have to show the value to our patients. So I'd ask the panel, are your prices set by your physicians, or are you guys setting the prices? And do you put your prices out in public so that public can see, so that one payer does not pay differently than another payer?
Let me rephrase it. So the question was,
who is setting the prices within your clinic? Is it physicians or you? And what are you making those prices public?
So in our case, our retail is online. You can go see right now what our prices are for retail. And then our team sets it for the employer. And that employer, some of those employers are 5 or 10 or 20. Some of those employers are 1,000 or 2,000. So they're going to want tiers. Employee plus spouse. You're going to want 4 tiers. And so you got to have that flexibility to understand what does it mean to do those 4 tiers, because that's what they're going to want. Way different than a plumbing company with 10 employees that you can just say, here are our prices. So and they're going to say, because we're giving more volume, we'd like to have a negotiated discount.
Yeah. So same with us. We've taken a huge analysis with our medical team and our corporate team, and our price is a price. It doesn't fluctuate. We have one standard price that's out there, and you can, we share that openly. And then on the flip side of that, we also have community relationships with specialists and imaging centers and everything, and we publish all of those cash transparent prices as well. That helps our physicians be able to steer and think of the financial impact on the patients as well.
Last question.
Specifically around that, how have you overcome the hurdle of, so if I say this hospital is getting this price on a CT scan, then Blue Cross, the fear is the hospitals are going to have Blue Cross in our area who has 80% of the profitable business is going to crush them because now they put out a price cheaper than what Blue Cross is. So we have to kind of get a one by one quote and usually publish those. We're working on agreements to be able to do that. But how have y'all solved that?
if you could just answer that, this will be our last question.
Yep, I'll rephrase that. So we don't publish it to the public. We publish it to the physician and to the employees. But I mean, the reason we do that to the physician is going back even to Dino's remark is employers want an engaged population. I mean, an engaged physician. And so we want them to see data to make these decisions. We want to put a medical director on site who understands the business case why they're there. Physicians are our most educated employees. We want to leverage that and attack that. The last thing I want to say is, physicians have been beaten up by the system for a long time. I've been in the direct primary care movement and been following it since 2012, and I have heard this over and over and over again. But the other side of it is employers have too. And employers since 1999 have seen an increase in their costs by 300%. And so this is an awesome opportunity to take and partner with employers. And there's no better practitioner of health than the primary care physician to impact that. And so I think it's the perfect partnership to really show the power.